Hey, so are you looking to buy a home? Maybe you've been scouting the internet, looking at Zillow, looking at properties with your real estate agent. Well, before you go ahead and make a purchase or make an offer, what I'm going to do is share with you in this video just a couple of things to look out for and a couple of tips and tricks that could potentially save you thousands of dollars in potential repairs. So without further ado, let's jump right in right after this. Hey guys, what's going on? Rico Garcia here, founder of EcoTech Pro. And in today's video, what we're going to be talking about is buying a home, right? What are some of the things that you should be looking at? And these are really quite simple, but they're very easily overlooked. I mean, look, let's face it. It's a lot of work to find a home that you actually like. You are going from home to home to home with your real estate agent. And by the time that everything is said and done, not only is your head spinning, but your feet are hurting from just walking around in so many properties, right? So finally, you found a property that you like. Now the question is this actually a good buy? Or is it just aesthetically pleasing, right? So what are some of the things that you should be mindful of before you actually make an offer on this property? Well, number one is hire a good home inspection company. Hire someone who's going to do an in-depth dive and an in-depth report on the entire property, right? We're talking about a multi-point inspection, checking the roof, checking the attic space, checking each and every single room in the property. How is the plumbing looking? How is the drywall looking? Are there any signs of previous water damage or maybe something that was covered up? So typically a good a good home inspection company should be providing you with a good bird's eye view of the overall condition of the house. And typically they will have a lot of recommendations. Sometimes these recommendations are really small and easy fixes, like changing out, light switch covers and things like that. Or if there's a light bulb that's missing, they will highlight stuff like that, which those are all easy fixes and shouldn't be a deal breaker. But really what you want to get at is making sure that there's nothing hidden behind the scenes, which leads me to my second. Number two, regardless of how good or how bad the home inspection report is, make sure that you also get a licensed mold assessor to go into the property and to also go through this thing with a fine-tooth comb and to do as many tests as are necessary. Now, why is this so important? You would be surprised at how many clients we have had personally that had a home inspection done, but they weren't mold assessors. They didn't run any mold tests. And yet, as soon as the homeowner moves into their brand new home, now they're faced with a situation where they need mold remediation because it was hidden and out of sight, or the home inspector simply didn't catch it. Now, if you have a home inspector do his thing, his or her thing, and you also have a mold assessor go in to not only do indoor air quality testing, but go ahead and moisture map the entire property. Make sure that there's nothing out of the norm. They'll typically also look at other areas in the property, if you instruct them to make sure that there may not be something that could potentially happen later on in the future. For example, how is the windows? Are they sealed properly? Do you have a sprinkler that might be hitting the side of the house? Things along those lines. But ultimately, the indoor air quality is really important, making sure that air samples are taken, making sure that they do swab samples. And also, here's a little tip. If you are the buyer, this is a little industry thing that nobody wants to talk about because it's totally taboo. Make sure that you, as the buyer, initiate getting a mold assessor in there. The reason for this is very important. Number one, if it's the buyer that is doing it, in other words, you are hiring the mold assessor, they're going to do everything possible to make sure that they are going to find whatever it is that they're out there to find. Now, there have been situations that have happened in the industry where the seller will hire a mold assessor in order to do some testing, and miraculously, there's no mold that's found. Why? I don't know. You'd have to ask them, but I mean, one would assume that the buyer really told the assessor, hey, we're trying to sell this property. Please tell me that there's nothing here. And who knows how that conversation goes. But moral of the story is that these things do happen in the industry, and you as the buyer, you don't want to take that report from somebody else. You want to go ahead and do your own due diligence, find your own reputable mold assessor that's going to provide you with the absolute best report, and also is going into that particular project in order to put your mind at ease. And if there's something to be found, he's going to make sure to report back to you. Also, in the event that the mold assessor report comes back and you do in fact need mold remediation, I would strongly recommend for you to also go ahead and find a mold remediation company, the company that's actually going to remove the mold from the property, to go ahead and start pricing things out based on the mold assessor's report as well as the home inspection report, if it applies. The reason why this is so important, again, if you leave this up to the person who is selling the property, typically you'll get a much lower price, or as opposed to if you, or should I say estimate, typically you'll get a much lower estimate that may not be true and reflective of the true pricing. Whereas if you go out and get the pricing yourself, you should know pretty much within reason what this is actually going to cost you. In other words, the buyer or the seller isn't going to give you some lowball quote on what they think it might cost you. That way you get excited about the deal. Now, as an additional note, something that does happen, and also if any of you people that are selling properties are watching this video, something that does happen quite often in the industry as well, whether people admit it or not, it's just the way that it is, and you can't fix the world on a single conversation, is mold remediation companies will actually send different price points depending if you're a buyer or if you're a seller. Why? Because a lot of people understand that they use estimates as a bargaining chip, right? So if you are buying a home and you've got a $30,000 estimate on one hand, well, that's a $30,000 bargaining chip, right? Where you can say to the seller and be like, hey, it's going to cost me $30,000, so give me a discount on the property and let's negotiate the terms. What do you want to do, right? Whereas on the opposite end, the seller might say, hey, look, you've got a 30,000, I've got a 15,000. This is really what it's going to cost. And, now all of a sudden it becomes a bidding war based on the estimates that are out there. So just making sure that every party is hiring their own individual setting, making sure that the professionals are providing you with accurate information and non-biased information is always really, really important. Now, moving on to number 3. Now, number 3 really should be covered by the home inspection report, if not by the mold assessor report, but still, nothing is better than looking at a property with your own set of eyes and kind of trying to determine whether or not there are some damages, right? Because again, look, even the pros are people and people make mistakes, right? They could be in a rush. They could be trying to get to the next job site. God only knows what the issues may be, right? So where are a couple of areas that you as a potential home buyer should be looking at when looking to make an offer on a property? Number 1, you definitely want to look at any and all plumbing that's easily accessible. What I mean by this is you want to look under kitchen sinks. You want to look under vanities. You want to look, at the hot water heater or the surrounding area. The reason, and you basically want to look at any high water area, right? To see if there's been any previous water damage, or if it just looks a little bit too clean. In other words, does it look like it's recently been repaired? Does it look like it's recently been painted? Does anything look a little bit too too in its place, if you will, right? Because remember, unless you're buying a brand new home, there's typically some things that some normal wear and tear that should be taking place. So once you start looking at all of these high water areas, high moisture areas, you also want to go ahead and now start looking at the bathrooms, right? You want to make sure that you look at the tubs, look at the areas where the tub meets the drywall. Make sure that you take a look at baseboards. Is there any discoloration? Is the caulking starting to crack a little bit? Typically, that's a good indicator of some potential moisture in those areas. You also want to take a really good close look at the tile in the bathroom. Is this tile too squeaky clean? In other words, touch it. Make sure that you feel it and that it hasn't been resurfaced. Make sure that it hasn't been repainted. You would be surprised at how many times I've gone into properties that are up for sale from people that just flip real estate, where literally they've covered up mold on tile with fresh paint, and this is how they're selling it to the public, right? And again, we can't, cast any stones. At the end of the day, everybody's got to make their money however they feel right about it. But buyer beware. Just make sure that you are actually comfortable with the purchase that you're about to make. Now, these are things that could very easily be overlooked by a home inspector, right? So again, so long as you have an eye to kind of start asking the questions, why does this tile look like that? Why is it freshly painted? Why is this, look a little out of place? That might just cause a conversation to where now you could ask the home inspector or the mold assessor or any other contractor that may be helping you throughout this process, and you might actually be surprised with some of the answers that you get. So great. So now you've looked at the plumbing. Now you've looked at the bathrooms and the showers. You've looked at the grout lines. You've looked at the tile. Now what you might want to do is start looking at all the corners of the ceiling, right? Does anything look out of place? Is there any drywall seams that you are seeing, right? Is there any cracks in the ceiling? Are there any patches that don't match, let's say, the knockdown finish, right? In other words, this was clearly worked on in the past. Well, why was it worked on in the past? Was it a roof issue? And was this roof issue taken care of? Or is there plumbing somewhere running through the property, somewhere through the roof? And is that currently an issue? How long ago was it repaired? Things of that nature are really, really important to really get to the bottom to, and could really save you thousands and thousands of dollars later on. So great. So far you've got your home inspector, you've got your mold assessor. If needed, you got a mold remediation estimate. You have personally walked around the interior of this property. Nothing is really raising a red flag. You're perfectly comfortable. You want to move forward. What other areas should you really look out for? Well, don't forget the exterior of the property. Again, most of the stuff should pop up in a home inspector report. There's no conversation more uncomfortable than speaking to a client that just recently bought a home that says, I wish I would have looked at this, instead of just trusting a report. So make sure that you do an exterior walkthrough on the property as well. Now, this would be very, very simple things. Number one, take a look at gutters. Here in Florida, gutters are actually a pretty big deal, right? They keep the water, or they're supposed to keep the water, away from the house. It's really important. So if there's gutters that are missing or gutters that are off angle, this may be something for you to consider when making a purchase. And more importantly, does the exterior of the property have any kind of stucco cracks? Can you see the caulking that's been cracking around any of the exterior windows? Is there any grading issues? In other words, where the house and the exterior grass or sand, how is that? Is that leaned up against the house, or is it away from the house, right? These are all really important things for you to take a look at. And if the home inspector doesn't catch it, well, at least now you, the savvy consumer, can go ahead and have a conversation of certain things for you to look at that could potentially save you thousands of dollars later on down the road. Because look, let's face it, what you want to do when you purchase a home Unless it's some, repairs that there's some remodels that you actually want to do, typically you want a set of keys, you want to move your stuff in, and you want to call it a day. So just being versed in some of the things that you should be looking at is extremely, extremely important. Okay, so now you've got through this entire process. You've got the home inspector, no major deals there. You had a mold assessor come in. There was no mold in the property. You're comfortable with everything, the indoor air quality. There's no moisture issues. You didn't have to get a mold remediation guy involved. You didn't have to get any major contractors involved. You're ready to go ahead and make the next move and place an offer on the property. Now, what is the next thing that you should really consider? Well, that's exactly what we're going to talk about now. Number one, before you buy a property, or while you're buying the property, or shortly thereon after buying the property, you need to get insurance on said property, right? Now, all insurance is not created equal. My biggest recommendation is have a conversation with your insurance agent, but go ahead and give yourself an added layer of security. Get in contact with a reputable public adjuster. Yes, a public adjuster to go ahead and review your policy. Now, why do I make this recommendation? Well, it's very simple. Number one, when you're a homeowner, it's not a question of if you're going to have an issue. It's a question of when you're going to have an issue, whether it's, a named storm or hurricane or, a pipe that burst or anything else that could potentially go wrong in a property. What you want to make sure is that a person, public adjuster in this case, who doesn't have a vested interest in anything at this point, because you don't have a claim, what you want them to do is to take an honest look at your policy, because remember, someone is selling you an insurance policy. 9 times out of 10, they don't know, or they don't care to ask the right questions about what the best coverage is for you. Now, a lot of things have been changing inside of the insurance arena, inside of the insurance world, and no one is more prepared to answer those questions than someone who's consistently fighting for people's rights, fighting for people's claims, than a public adjuster. So my suggestion would be to finally go ahead and finalize everything on your new home. Once everything else passes with flying colors and you're comfortable with the buying decision, the very last buying decision associated with purchasing your new home is going to be how this home is going to be insured. Again, get in contact with the public adjuster and have them look at the insurance policy. Most guys will go ahead and do this absolutely free of charge because, again, they know that it's a matter of when you're going to have an issue, and what they want to do is they want to plant that seed. They want to make sure that they do right by you now, because again, when you do have an issue, what they'd like for you to do is for you to contact them, so that way they can go ahead and fight for your claim and make sure that you're not being nickeled and dimed by said insurance company. So again, these are some of the biggest tips that I would recommend on any new person who's looking to buy a home, or any new person. I don't know if you have to be a new person to buy a home. If you're a person looking to buy a new home, then these would be some of my biggest tips for you to go ahead and have a smooth process and hopefully enjoy home ownership. So anyways, if you liked this video, if you found some value, go ahead and smash the like button, hit the notification bell, hit the subscribe, and do everything else that's required of you nowadays every time that you watch a video. It would really mean the world to me and my company. And again, stick around next time for another video. Peace.